All right, guys. Today we're gonna be reacting to German houses versus American houses, construction design and scale. Let's see what's going on here. I would like to just get a perspective here from this channel. We know this channel is not new for to my channel. Type Ashton. I'm gonna leave the links in the description down below. That way you guys can go and check it. Let's jump in. Let's see what's going on.
The reason why Germans tend to trend more towards multifamily housing as well as renting, it has a lot to do with not only social aspects, but economic aspects as well as historical events.
Okay.
For our channel. If you're new here, my name's Ashton,
I'm Jonathan.
and along with our son Jack, we're the Black Forest family.
So if you've been following our channel for any length of time now, you will know we bought a house.
Yeah, and
Hey.
ever since we signed the contract,
Hey, congratulations. That's very good. Always a good step. Not an easy step, very good step.
documents, gosh, just about what, eight months ago?
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Last year.
I mean, honestly, this whole process of being under construction on a new home has really opened our eyes to just how different the construction process is here in Germany from what we're used to in the United States.
And you know, it's not just the construction processes. There are some significant differences between houses made in Germany
Okay,
and
let's
houses
hear it.
made in the United States.
Yeah, down to the building materials, the HVAC, but even smaller items like interior detailing such as doors and windows and light switches. Yeah, there's a pretty significant list, I think, that make houses just intrinsically different between the two countries.
Okay.
And you know, that really brings up a great point. YouTube is filled with videos, and there are already some really good ones out there that explain some of these differences.
You know, yeah, you're right. So, for example, there's a really awesome video that was done by Feli in Germany. She's a German girl who is living in the United States, and she did an awesome video about this. But no,
I should
also
check
there's
that
another
video.
couple called Passport 2, and you might be familiar with them. They're a fellow American couple who are living here in Germany, and they did a great video that just talked about some of the differences that we as Americans experience by living in German housing. So please check out their videos. We'll put the links down below in the description if you want to watch those as a primer for this video. But you know, given the fact that we're actually building a house here in Germany and given our professional backgrounds, we also thought that maybe this would be the perfect opportunity to give this topic a proper Black Forest family treatment and really dive deep into why these differences exist, how they came about, and what they can ultimately tell us about each of their respective countries.
Okay.
All right, and to give a little bit of a background here on why we think we're capable of talking about this, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I have been one for the last 10 years. And I really love to learn about how things work and how they operate and how they come together. And I've been living in Germany since 2013, and I've lived now
About 11 years, huh?
3 different apartments here in Freiburg.
And yeah, and so a little bit about my professional background as well. I can't officially say that I am Dr. Ashton just yet, but my PhD is actually wrapping up next week. But beyond that, I actually have a bachelor's of interior design as well as a master's of architectural studies where I actually did an emphasis in architectural history. So in addition to that, I also was a university lecturer where I taught courses on construction methods, building design, architectural history, urban planning, you name it. And I also have a professional background working in architecture firms in both the United States and here in Germany.
Oh wow, she looks so different there, right? She look very different.
So I think now many of you are probably wondering at this point, if we're going to be comparing American houses and German houses, how do we know which ones we actually want to examine?
Yeah, to be fair, this is a little bit
Good point.
easier from the American side of things. We just, quite frankly, don't have the depth of history as our European counterparts. But you actually bring up a really good point because when we look at German residential archetypes, there's a lot to choose from.
Like I said,
Yeah, that's what I
earlier,
noticed.
How do we know which?
It's
building
not
we
like
wanna
United States that there's one theme and they just go with that theme. Seems like it's very different in Germany in that regard.
choose from. Now is the time for us to set up some parameters.
So for starters, we're only going to be tackling modern residential construction. For us, that's basically anything that was built within the last 100 years. In addition, we're not going to be tackling, at least in this video, the various regional archetypes of homes in both the United States and Germany.
Yeah, because we know there's a big difference between a New England colonial and a California bungalow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but despite these sort of stylistic differences, they actually still share a lot in common in terms of construction methods and construction materials, for example.
And again, guys, there is a lot to address here. We cannot get all of this into one video. This will be a series and we will get to all of the points.
Yeah, so in this video, again, we're gonna be talking about construction and design. But in our next video, what you can expect from us is a lengthy discussion about differences in housing costs, whether you're renting or buying, or what that means if you wanna get a home loan in the United States and Germany. So if you're really interested about this topic and you want to learn more, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be first notified when that next video goes live.
Okay.
So, lass uns anfangen, and let's get started with part 1 of this series, where we specifically take a good detailed look into construction methods and design.
Yeah. Yeah. American Dream and single family houses. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
I think
they're-
the best place to start out this comparison is to point out the obvious. Americans love having their single family house and their big yard with a white picket fence. This is actually one of the things that is a pretty accurate stereotype for Americans.
I have to agree. That's very common around here. Not only you want a house, but you want some space to just walk around. I agree.
Because really, the idea of having your own house and your own piece of land is greatly tied to the American dream.
And you know, speaking of this American dream, I feel like this is something I can probably really talk about more in depth because, well, I don't want this video to be like a soapbox moment for me. I have had quite a few of you ask about what my PhD dissertation is all about. And again, the sort of Cliff Notes version to all of this is that housing in the United States, especially home ownership specifically, is something that the American government doesn't just promote and encourage, they actually
Interesting.
quite frankly subsidize it. So home ownership, quite frankly, receives far more federal tax subsidies than rental housing. According to analysis by Novogradac and Company of home ownership and rental subsidies, including in the recent Joint Committee on Taxation report, the federal government will actually provide more than $400 billion in tax
Oh, wow.
subsidies for home ownership over a 5-year period. For rental housing, it's less than $72 billion. Guys, that's a 6-to-1 ratio.
That's
so
a lot.
I don't want to like bore you to death with the topic of my PhD dissertation. If you're really that interested, it'll be published later this year. But essentially, all of this is to say that the US federal government far out subsidizes private wealthy homeowners than they do low-income families. And ultimately, that says a lot about what it means.
Hold on. But what? We have to be careful because somebody that is poor in New York City buying almost $1 million apartment, it's not the same one that buying one from Montana. So we need to just really put things into perspective. What does, hear me out, folks. Is the guy from Montana poor because he bought a $200,000 house with 2,500 square feet, or the guy from New York that bought an apartment for 900 square feet, but it almost cost him $1 million? You see what I'm saying? It'll be interesting where she got that comparison because numbers that, at the end, folks, numbers are just things that are just give you a startup, right? But the guy that has that house in Montana, they have 35 acres behind his house. It's not the same from the guy that bought that apartment in New York City with only one bathroom. I mean, paper, it looks like the guy from New York City has more money, but the guy from Montana has more wealth. But we have to be careful here, right?
Means to own a home in the United States.
So when we were back in the United States for Christmas last year and we were driving through the suburbs, it became absolutely apparent that single family houses were everywhere. People having their own house, their own massive
A
yard,
must.
and multifamily houses in many areas are actually very uncommon.
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily use the word reverse culture shock, but
It
I
kind of
mean,
was.
It kind of. If you spend a lot of
So,
time in
I mean,
Germany,
there's
Mike.
actually some pretty significant statistics that also back up our observation. As of October 2021, there were 208.4 million single-family dwellings in the United States. And by comparison, there were only 37.8 million multifamily units.
And guys, when we were driving through the United States over Christmas time, we were in Kansas City and we were in Illinois, and it really just kind of seems like houses just continue to get larger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
in
I
Wisconsin, they're big, man. We're thinking about buying a house. That's one of our dream. And the square feet here per dollar is longer than Iowa, Illinois, some places. So yeah,
We've just been living in Germany for too long, but it does seem like things just continue to become more and more massive in the United States. But again, when we came back and we did a little bit more research on this, I guess like what we saw, it wasn't just like some weird reverse culture shock. There's actually some truth behind it. So the average single family house in the United States has overall increased in size since 2000. It reached its peak of 2,467 square feet in 2015 before falling just a little to 2,301
Yeah, that
square
sounds
feet
about right.
in 2019. So for our German audience, that's approximately 215 to 230 square meters on average.
Which is totally mind-boggling for us because the house we bought here is a little more than half of that. And you know, there are, of course, some
I
reasons
mean,
for
there's
this.
not a lot of space in Germany. There's not a lot of space in Germany, so that means that the land per square feet costs more in Germany than the United States because we have more land here. Yeah, that's what it is.
America is very large and
Yeah.
the land is relatively cheap. There's space for people to spread out
Yeah, you
and
can-
build their own house with their own yard with a big white picket fence.
Yep. That's one of the differences, I guess, right?
All right, now guys, so by contrast, here in Germany, they not only have a larger proportion of the population that rents versus owns, but they also have a much larger proportion of the population living in multifamily housing.
Yeah, you know, don't get us wrong. You can find plenty of large single-family houses in the countryside, but it's important to point out that in Germany, the houses and the renting population is going to differ significantly.
So, what exactly is behind this trend towards multifamily housing and such a low home ownership rate?
Well, there are a couple of reasons, and to tackle the elephant in the room about Germany's heavy rental market, it kind of has something to do with what happened in the 1930s, 1940s.
Yeah, that unpleasant business. So by the time
But why making it uncomfortable? It's not that uncomfortable. Well, it's not uncomfortable. It just happened. Let's move forward.
Germany's unconditional surrender in May of 1945, it's important to note here that 20% of Germany's housing stock was in rubble. Some 2.25 million homes were gone.
Man,
Another 2
damn.
million were damaged, and a 1946 census showed that an additional 5.5 million housing units were needed in what would ultimately become West Germany. And Germany's housing wasn't the only thing in tatters. The economy was just a disaster. Financing was practically non-existent, and the currency was virtually worthless. So if Germans were going to have a place to live, some sort of government program was the only way to rebuild it. And soon after West Germany was established in 1949, the government pushed through its first housing law, and home building boomed thanks to a combination of direct subsidies, as well as a generous tax exemption that was available to public, nonprofit, as well as private entities. West Germany actually chopped its housing shortage in half by 1956. But the vast majority of new housing units were rentals in multifamily buildings. And you might be
Well, it makes
wondering,
sense. They need a space for people to live. Yeah, like, so it
why?
makes sense.
And what we found was that basically there was little demand for potential buyers. The German mortgage
No money.
market was incredibly weak, and quite frankly, German banks required borrowers to plunk down huge chunks of money.
So there are some more modern reasons for this too. So for example, in the United States, if you own your house and you live in your house, you have a mortgage on your house, you can actually deduct the interest from that mortgage on your taxes. But in Germany, if you're an owner of a house, you have a mortgage, you cannot deduct it.
In addition,
Oh,
German
wow.
banks are a lot more risk averse. It's gonna make getting a home loan a lot more expensive and harder to get. That's not necessarily a bad thing because like America doesn't exactly have the best track record in terms
point.
of making secure, good.
So Germany, if you have the money, you buy the house. I think that's fair. If you ask me, I think that's fair.
Sound investment home loans
There were
that
some
aren't
problems.
risky.
Yeah,
A few
that may
problems.
have impacted the whole world.
A bubble may have burst.
Yeah, it did.
We'll just
And not only that, and you can still see it today where people are just basically just taking another loan on top of the other loan because they want to do repayments. So what the repayment does is just keep putting equity into the house. So all of a sudden, the house that cost you $100,000 12 years ago, now it's costing you almost $500,000. Yeah, it might happen again.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
Now, guys, I think like just to sort of summarize all of this here, I feel like it's important to note that what we've listed out are just a couple of reasons. It's not an exhaustive list here. But it just effectively goes to show that the reason why Germans tend to trend more towards multifamily housing as well as renting over buying, it has a lot to do with not only social aspects, but economic aspects as well as historical events. And I think this really just sort of goes to show that you can really learn a lot about a country's history as well as its socioeconomic status by taking a deeper look into what its housing trends are.
Yeah, and I just simply don't like this. Yes, everything woody, everything.
So
I think what 70% of the house is just built with wood.
a number of historical, economic, and political reasons, houses in America are just newer.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
I mean, really, this isn't just an observation. Again, this can kind of be backed up by statistics. What we do know is that of the 140 million houses in the United States, about 2/3 of them, like 62%, they were all constructed since 1970.
Wow.
That means that 2/3 of all of the houses in the United States are about 50 years old or less, which is kind of crazy when you think about just the incredible.
Well, that makes sense. Because the concept of owning a house through a bank it's almost a new concept. Even though it has been around for a couple of years, but back then people used to just buy the house in cash. Now with the popularity of banks, of banks lending money to buy houses, plus now the female is just coming to work as well. In their mindset, it's like, okay, now we can get a mortgage and pay the mortgage and get a house. Happens to be that they cannot pay for the house. They have to just create repayments. And they just develop a huge bubble. Because back then, in the United States, the saying goes like, you don't buy a house if you don't have the money. People threw that out of the trash and start getting mortgages. Yeah, this is all new stuff. Yes, I agree.
Architectural history that you experience every day living here in Germany.
All right, guys, I think one of the obvious points here to make is that houses in the United States can be made relatively cheap and also very quick, which is one of the
Very
reasons
quick.
why in the last 50 years this housing boom has gotten started.
Yeah, and I guess as part of that too, it should also be noted that in the US, wood is pretty abundantly available, and it's again also pretty cheap, which makes for it to be pretty much like the natural choice for how we should construct our homes. Now, don't get me wrong, there will always be exceptions to this rule. But on average, in the US, homes are built with wood framing sitting on top of a concrete.
Yeah, I agree. The only places that you get cement is where is in the South, Florida, Alabama, some places in Texas, and that's pretty much probably what Georgia, and then Puerto Rico. But outside of that, everything is wood. And no, they're right. It's so cheap, man. Ah,
Foundation or a basement. The walls are going to be insulated with typically fiberglass insulation,
Yep.
and the interior walls will use drywall or sheetrock, which is gypsum plaster pressed between sheets of thick paper. From there, the exterior is usually going to be some kind of combination of brick, vinyl, or wood siding,
Yeah.
or even EIFS, which is an exterior wall cladding that uses rigid insulation boards on the exterior of the wall sheathing with a plaster appearance exterior. The roof shingles are also going to be made from fiberglass asphalt in various shades of colors. Typically, this is in gray or black, but again, that changes with whatever is fashionable at that particular time.
And you know, guys, really by choosing this construction method, houses in the United States can
Boom.
be built really fast, or at
Yeah.
least relatively fast. So you can
Very
really get
concerning.
start to finish in about 7 months.
Yeah, that's pretty
yeah,
incredible.
that's concerning. That's concerning. I'm not gonna lie, it's concerning. Yeah, a good house should take you, should take you some time. But 6 months, if you have good constructions, it sounds about right. Like if you build a house in Germany.
When you compare
Oh,
it
wait.
to Germany.
Hold up, folks.
Here. Now, in our experience of actually building a house in Germany, we've actually found that things just tend to take a little bit longer.
Yeah, like we signed our contract in June, and when we did that, the foundation was already poured, it was
Yes.
already excavated, obviously. And this is in like a development which has already been under construction for a while.
Right.
And we hope to move in this August.
Yeah, and that's actually
Wow, when this video was uploaded? 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, probably a year and a half.
been pretty surprising because, like Jonathan said, all of the utilities were there. It was ready to go. It was already
So what was the problem?
really in the process of being built.
What was the problem?
We kind of can anticipate at least 14 months before this house is actually finished. And granted, that has a lot to do with the fact that, well, for one, the
Regulations.
pandemic has put an incredible stress on the construction
Yeah, for
industry.
sure.
The lead times on materials are so much longer than what
Sourcing's
they
a
would
mess,
normally
yeah.
be. Yeah, absolutely. But on top of all that, we actually got a letter from our developer in December saying
Oh, yeah.
that there was a COVID outbreak on the construction site and they had to close down for basically an entire month.
Man, that's crazy, bro. That's crazy, and you cannot back out. You cannot back out. You have to you're already in, so you're stuck, unless you want to go to court or something. I don't even know how that works in Germany, but you have to let it be at that point.
Yeah, there's a lot that's going to happen in the next 5 months, so we'll be sure to keep you posted. But our experience of building a house in Germany actually isn't all that abnormal. In general, we found by doing research for this video that in total and on average, in general, because there will always be exceptions here, it usually does take a little bit longer to construct a house in Germany. And part of that has to do with simply the way they build their homes.
So when it comes to living, Germans love solid construction, and so do we. And that figure is actually backed up by the Federal Statistic Office.
Yeah. So their findings in specific found
There we go,
that
folks.
between 2000 and 2015, solid structure houses accounted for 85% of all of the homes built in Germany.
There we go,
I mean,
folks.
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and actually our house qualifies as this solid construction form. And let me explain just here a little bit. So our house in particular uses a combination of both concrete walls as well as something called Kalksandsteinmauerwerk, which is effectively a
What the hell is that?
limestone, sandstone, concrete with what's called Wärmedämmverbund system, which is a warm insulating compound system. And this is really common in modern German residential construction.
So solid construction is basically built around non-flammable materials, but I think it's important to keep in mind your timber built houses aren't just gonna spontaneously combust.
Yeah, okay. In all fairness, though, these solid construction buildings, they're also going to offer a lot of additional benefits.
But you know
like
what's
being
crazy?
a
It is kind of big though. I know they said it's small, but look at those ceilings. He's in the basement, of course, but it's big though.
lot more soundproof, as well as having a higher insulative value than the thin walls of the timber framed buildings in the United States.
Which is actually really important in Germany because everything is so densely packed together.
Yeah.
Not hearing your neighbor is a
Plus.
hugely advantageous selling feature. Where in America, everything is wood and
You can
know,
hear
you don't
everything.
have a neighbor to listen to, so it's really not a big problem.
Yeah, although I can say that from living in an apartment building in the United States that is actually built out of like wood frame construction, you hear everything.
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 Yep. You can hear everything. When I'm saying everything, 2 and 3 in the morning, with a rhythm.
Including
Everything.
entire conversations.
Yep.
We're not doing anything. We're just sitting around talking quietly.
My cats can't sleep.
But, you know, to be balanced and fair, I feel like we also shouldn't necessarily just sing the praises of German construction because there are naturally going to be some trade-offs here. So I think at least it's good that we at least mention them. So, for example, any future changes to the home are probably going to be a lot more costly and more time-consuming with a house that is solid construction. In addition, the primary energy consumption and the CO2 emissions in the production of the raw materials are significantly higher than with timber structures. Plus, they're not necessarily regenerative and only conditionally recyclable. But, you know, for us, I feel like ultimately we just really love that German houses sort of feel like they're built to last.
Yeah, they really do. Like they have a solid feel, even though they're called solid construction. And I think it's really kind of pointed to the fact that Germans typically will do things properly.
And of course, you know, there are really some wonderful home developers in the United
Of
States,
course.
so we don't want to just overgeneralize here, but it does feel a little bit like
No, but they have a point. They're from Kansas, so in that area, he's right. Those houses, Illinois, Kansas, it's true. They're made by wood. It's different from the South, right? In some of the southern states, no, they're built with cement, but not in the majority of the United States.
American construction tends to be like slap and dash sort of approach, but
Yeah.
here in Germany, it's
Yeah,
also really
United States, Canada is the same problem, right? You know, I think there's a company that's going through a huge lawsuit because they were just putting these houses like McDonald's. Like they look very McDonald's, and they were falling apart. Yeah, you see a lot of those companies like that.
quite telling, I think, that solid construction residential homes, they actually tend to be sold for a higher value than
Yeah.
their prefab counterparts. So it's not really just an observation, it's actually worth something in the end.
Yep. And I'm gonna just leave it like that because I don't wanna. You wanna hear what's the next episode? Go to the links and hopefully you guys can enjoy that. But yeah, some of these comparisons are correct. I think one criticism that I have to just mention is some of these houses in the United States they're just built with tape and screwdrivers. It is what it is, but I would love to have stronger houses in the United States, stronger. And they cost too much for what they're really worth, in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I would love to hear you guys' opinion. I'll see you in the next one.